Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. So I wanted to update you on a story I've covered on this channel before, the story of Artemis Langford, the first transgender student to join the Kappa Kappa Gamma sorority. And there was a lawsuit that was going on at the time.
When college students join sororities, many of them do it for the sisterhood, for a place to belong, for lifelong friendships. They don't do it in hopes that a man will invade their personal space, staring at them silently, creeping them out. But that's exactly what happened at the Kappa Kappa Gamma house at the University of Wyoming, according to a new lawsuit. 6 sorority sisters say they were forced by the national chapter to allow a man, Artemis Langford, into their women-only organization because Langford says he's transgender. Now, what comes with being inducted into this sorority is unfettered access to the house, where about 40 college girls live. Now, a house where men, even fathers and boyfriends, are banned from being on the 2nd or 3rd floors because that's where the bedrooms and the communal bathrooms are. But Langford had access to all of it. According to the lawsuit, several times Langford had chosen to sit for hours on the couch in the 2nd floor common area. Langford stares at women walking past. One sorority member walked down the hall to take a shower wearing only a towel. She felt an unsettling presence, turned, and saw Langford watching her silently. The suit also alleges that he has watched members enter the house and sometimes had an erection visible through his leggings. Other times he had a pillow in his lap. Joining me now exclusively for an interview are 3 of the sorority sisters suing, Hannah and Jalen, who are both juniors, and Allie, who just graduated, along with their attorney, Cassie Craven from Longhorn Law. Hannah, let's start with you. How did all of this initially hit you when you were told that a man was to be a member of your sorority?
Yeah, we were all shocked. I can speak for myself saying, never thought this would happen to me, especially in a sorority, in a space for women. We were never told it was a unisex space. We joined under the impression that it was a single-sex organization.
Well, Jalen, I read the accounts of what made the sisters of the sorority uncomfortable about Artemis. What did he say to you or to any of you that you know that made you uncomfortable?
There were a lot of uncomfortable moments in the sorority house, and it just goes to show the importance of women's spaces ultimately. And that's why we're here today, is we're fighting for the importance of women's spaces and what it truly means to be a woman. We were promised from the beginning that we would have a sisterhood, meaning only females, and our national sorority has failed us. They have blatantly ignored us and ignored our values and valued someone else over us in this uncomfortable situation.
Yeah, well, Cassie, we reached out to the KKG national chapter, and they told us that while we cannot comment in detail on this pending litigation, it contains numerous false allegations. KKG values diversity and does not discriminate based on classes protected by state, local, or federal law. Well, Cassie, I guess they're relying on federal law here. I don't think Wyoming has state protections in this regard, but nevertheless, it looks like they're going to lean on the feds to win this case for them.
Laura, I just don't see a way out for them. They want everyone to believe that being a woman is nothing more than wearing lipstick and the pronouns that you use. And we all know that it amounts to womanhood. It amounts to a lifetime of experiences, and that's what they seek to deprive these young women of, and that's what we intend to fight for.
Now, Cassie, I guess Artemis doesn't live in the house, and according to the lawsuit, was given a waiver, so he didn't have to live there. Now, why is this?
Laura, we've seen extreme preferential treatment given to the individual involved, and it's very disheartening that when you're a 6'2", 260-pound man, you're treated as the victim in today's society. But the bylaws are very clear. This is an all-women's organization. Kappa was formed over 100 years ago to be that support system for women so that they could compete in the classroom against men. And now we just cease to exist. We're nothing more than an idea of self-identification.
Well, Allie, here's Artemis being interviewed by the school newspaper back in October. This was last year, talking about being admitted to your sorority, saying, "I feel so glad to be in a place that I think not only shares my values, but to be in a sisterhood of awesome women that want to make history. They want to break the glass ceiling, trailblazing, and I certainly feel that as their first trans member."
They sought legal action, and unfortunately they lost the court case because the court said it was outside the scope of their role to define a woman. They basically refused to define a woman and left it open because apparently the bylaws left it open when really 100 years ago, I'm sure they didn't think it was necessary to say that a woman had to be female. I'm sure they didn't think it was necessary to stipulate that. And these young ladies, they were not supported by the sorority in general. Apparently it's a very big chapter, and they said that, everybody's welcome. These young ladies were basically told that they don't matter. They're basically given that impression that they do not matter. Their concerns do not matter. Their expectations don't matter either. They joined the sorority believing they were going to have a sisterhood, believing they were going to be in a house with other women, with females, not with a biological male who is questionable. The people who were supposed to look out for the needs of these women basically didn't support them. As far as I'm concerned, according to the court documents, they didn't believe them. So believe all women doesn't apply in this case. When it comes to biological males who identify as women, they come first, not the actual females. So he had a sympathetic interview in the Washington Post. I've already reacted to the first sympathetic interview he had with MSNBC, where he was referred to as a brave woman. Now, in court, male pronouns were used for Artemis, and he doesn't seem to have a problem having a masculine side attributed to him when it suits him. So anyway, let's take a look at the interview. A trans woman joined a sorority, then her new sisters turned on her. I think this article should be referred to as the vilification of biological females, the vilification of women who speak out for themselves, the vilification of women who stand up for themselves, who seek legal action to hold these people in positions of authority accountable. That's what this article should be called. And of course, we're going to see the waterworks, we're going to see the tears, the images that will pull at people's heartstrings, reinforce the idea that these women, these young ladies who went to court over this are heartless. I think that's the purpose of this article, if you ask me. So, the way the article begins is absolutely ridiculous. It's romanticizing the whole thing. The morning sky was still dark as Artemis Langford's father hoisted the last of her belongings into her car for the drive back to college. Of course, since Artemis identifies as a woman now, Artemis's father has to help with hoisting the belongings into the car because a 6'2", 260-pound guy is helpless. So this article goes on to make claims that Artemis was put on neo-Nazi websites, was depicted with nooses and, all sorts of horrific claims. Apparently, this is what Artemis had to endure. How news stories about her had been posted on a forum for gun owners. It wasn't what she imagined last year when she joined Kappa Kappa Gamma at the University of Wyoming, becoming the first transgender woman in the state to be inducted into a sorority. She thought she had finally found sisterhood and a place to belong after years of shame and loneliness. Instead, she became a target. Right-wing pundits portrayed her on national television as a predator, as a perverted man who faked his way into a sorority to leer at women. Death threats followed. Strangers began stalking her. Police assigned extra patrols to the sorority house. So the aim of this article is simply to portray Artemis as the victim and to completely dismiss the concerns that the women had. Who was going to protect the women when it came to having a male in their house? When it came to expectations that were shattered? Because they weren't told that this sorority was open to biological males. They weren't pre-warned about that. In the same way, NCAA swimmers weren't told that a 6'2" male was going to be in their locker room. In the same way, they weren't pre-warned about that and were even told that they were bigots if they weren't okay with it. There's a theme going on here. And we're supposed to look at articles like this and believe that all of these things were happening to poor Artemis and dismiss the women in this situation. Not only did the women not have the sorority on their side, they didn't have the court on their side. The legal system wasn't on their side because the legal system refuses to define a woman, which tells me why the definition of a woman is so important and why radical leftists seek to dilute the definition. So as far as I'm concerned, articles like this seek to deter women from standing up for themselves. Articles like this seek to deter women from seeking legal action, because this is how they described those young women who went to court. But the most hurtful accusations came this past spring. That's when Artemis discovered members of her sorority, 7 sisters out of the 40-some members, were working with lawyers to oust her. On March 27, they filed a lawsuit in federal court against Artemis and Kappa Kappa Gamma. Hate from strangers is one thing, Artemis said. It was a gut punch after working so hard to get to realize there were people who never wanted me there in the first place. So apparently, seeking legal action to stand up for your rights is conspiring against somebody who you don't want there. It's conspiring to bring somebody down, when really it took a lot of courage for these young women to seek legal action, for their names to be out there. Because we know how young women are treated when they're not on board with biological males being in their spaces. These 7 women did nothing but seek to protect women's spaces. They did nothing but seek to protect sororities and to make sure that sororities are simply for females, so that no one else is blindsided, moving into a sorority house, and there's a man that's allowed to be in there. This wasn't them being bigots. This wasn't them being hateful. It's wrong to compare them to neo-Nazis and gun nuts. So if you want to read the article, I'll leave the link down below. I'm not going to torture you and go over it with a fine-tooth comb. So let's read more about the aftermath of the court case. A transgender student has shed tears of happiness after a judge dismissed the lawsuit that contested admission into a sorority at the University of Wyoming. Wyoming U.S. District Court Judge Alan Johnson, 84, ruled that he could not override how the private voluntary organization defined a woman and the order that Artemis not belong. In the lawsuit, 6 members of the 40-strong Kappa Kappa Gamma sorority chapter challenged 21-year-old Artemis Langford's admission by casting doubt on whether sorority rules allowed a transgender woman. Now, the fact is, the sorority were okay with it. 40-something members of the chapter, out of 40, there were 6 who weren't okay with it, 6 or 7. And because the sorority made it clear that it didn't mind opening up to biological males, the court said, we're not going to interfere with this. And that's why the girls lost. So as far as I'm concerned, 2 of the girls have now graduated. Anyone else who is thinking of joining a sorority must read their bylaws, must read what their rules are. But if you don't want to find yourself dealing with this sort of thing, then unless a sorority specifically says that they are for females only, natural-born females, don't join. Because if the sorority is okay with it, the courts aren't going to do anything. Now, a new precedent may be set sometime in the future, and that would be great. And I would say that, don't let this deter you from seeking legal action. Because all it takes is one judge who has sense to set a new precedent, and the sororities will have to understand that if legal action is sought, the courts are going to be on the side of the biological females. But as of now, that isn't the case. In light of recent events, it's obvious that America has a real problem when it comes to our academic institutions. They are basically indoctrination camps, as far as I'm concerned, and they are radicalizing students into radical leftist ideology. Marxism, whatever you want to call it. They're indoctrinating students into these, forms of ideology, and it's very, very disturbing. And they're doubling down on their extremist views. So I would say stay away from universities like that in general. So the girls also accused Langford of taking photos of them at a slumber party and making inappropriate comments. So in this interview, Langford is visibly upset. Anyone who sees that is going to tug at their heartstrings, is going to make these women look like monsters, especially going to court, conspiring against poor Langford. But what you're not going to see in these news articles are the tears of the women, are the tears of the females who nobody believed in court, who were basically called liars, who were called hateful, who they attempted to discredit and essentially belittle, and whose concerns and rights were trampled upon and dismissed. You're not going to see the tears of those women in these articles, especially in these woke media outlets. You're only going to see the biological male who's going to make all these claims that their life was threatened, that they were pursued by neo-Nazis and all these crazy scenarios. Those are going to be put out there. But you're not going to hear about the young ladies who I'm sure were also threatened by radical leftists, who were called all sorts of names, who were disparaged. You're not going to hear about that in these woke media outlets. You're not going to hear about them being told that if they're not okay with a 6'2" biological male, fully intact, being in their sorority house, if they're not okay with that, if they're uncomfortable with it even, that they're bigots. You're not going to hear how it's contradictory to be told that if you see a man on the street flashing unmentionables, that you should call the police. But if it's in your house, it's okay, as long as they identify as a woman. You're not going to hear about the confusion and the contradictions that they have to deal with now as young women. You're not going to hear about how their spaces are being infringed upon, how their privacy is being infringed upon by males. You're not going to hear about that. And if you do, it's going to be under the guise of bigotry, exclusion, not wanting people to exist, hate, violence. You're only going to hear about it in that capacity. So just remember that when you see people like Artemis come out and cry and talk about how much of a victim they are, remember the women who were told that they don't matter. So following the lawsuit's dismissal, Langford is hopeful for a fresh start this semester. Maybe I can just be another student on campus, another regular sister in the Wyoming chapter of Kappa Kappa Gamma. Langford told the Washington Post, maybe I can just be me. The lawsuit portrayed Langford as a sexual predator, but the judge found that the claims about such behavior turned out to be nothing more than a drunken rumor. Okay, so as far as the court was concerned, that's all it was. The suit also alleged Langford violated KKG policies by joining sorority despite not being a woman or making an effort to look like one. I wish it didn't matter to me. All the things they said, how they painted me like a mannish freak, Langford said, speaking of the suit. Some parts were completely made up. Others were things I remember, but in their version was twisted to look weird, gross, sexual. Other than occasionally wearing women's clothing, Mr. Smith makes little effort to resemble a woman, the suit stated, while using the incorrect pronoun and an anonymous male name. So this is the message that we're left with after this lawsuit. If you're not okay being in the house with a 6'2" biological male who is clearly a man who identifies as a woman, claims to identify as a woman, but doesn't even make an effort to blend in, if you're not okay with that, if you're even uncomfortable with that, you are the bigot. If you're not okay sharing a shower, a bathroom, all of these personal spaces with a man, there's something wrong with you. The NCAA swimmers were told the same thing. Were even offered counseling because they weren't okay with it. Man on the street, flashing, showing his unmentionables, that's wrong. But if it's in your sorority house, if it's in your locker room, if it's in your shower, that's perfectly okay as long as they say they identify as a woman. So all those emotions, all of that fear, all of that sense of wanting to protect yourself, you need to train yourself to put that aside, because this person wants to be included. into the realm of womanhood, into the realm of sisterhood. You have to put all of that aside. Everything that is instinctive, that tells you that you need to be on your guard, you need to learn to put that aside. That's what this lawsuit is saying. And it's a very dangerous message. It's a very dangerous message for women, a very dangerous message for young girls. Not only is it dangerous, it's contradictory and it's confusing, to say the least. So let me know what you think. Should we have more sympathy towards Artemis and the predicament that Artemis had to face? And were these young women heartless for pursuing a lawsuit to protect their sorority, to make sure that it is strictly female? Let me know what you think. Thanks for watching. Take care of yourselves, and God willing, I will see you in the next video.